Well, going into this season, quarterback Jayden Daniels has three things on his mind: Heisman, national championship, NFL draft.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thanks for making your first listen every single day, Locked on LSU. My name is Caroline Fenton. I'm your host, as I am every single day. You can follow me on Twitter at CarolineFenton1. You can also follow along with the podcast at Locked on LSU. However you listen, however you interact, wherever you listen, just appreciate you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every single day. And of course, we're part of the Locked on Network, your team every day. Found an article on Pro Football Focus. The headline is Built for the Big Moments. Jayden Daniels has major plans for his final season of college football, and it is no exaggeration. Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus spoke with Jayden Daniels about his path, his time at Arizona State, his first season at LSU, and what he's looking for in his final season. Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus joins us now. And joining Locked On LSU now is Pro Football Focus's Max Chadwick. Max, appreciate you for coming on the podcast. You just recently put out an article on PFF.com, your breakdown, your sit down with Jayden Daniels. And I want to get into all the nitty gritty with that. But first, your overall impression, getting to sit down and talk with Jayden Daniels. What did you make of him as a player and as a person?
Oh, he's just the best. He's a great player, obviously, but he's even a better in an interview, which is he's saying a lot considering how amazing of a player he is. And yeah, just the confidence just exudes from that guy. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into the Alabama game, but I was talking to him about that game. And he was kind of like, yeah, man, like I wanted the ball in my hands, and me being like kind of a nervous guy. Like, man, when I remember when I was an athlete and it came down to crunch time, I was like, Coach, just go to anyone else but me. I don't want the ball in my hands. I don't want to be the guy that loses us the game. But Jayden's the guy that's like, no, I want the ball in my hands. I want to be the guy that carries his team to victory.
And it's interesting that you say confidence, because I think that was kind of the root of the two Jayden Daniels that we saw this past season. Look at maybe the Florida State game, the Mississippi State games. Early on in the season, you saw not a super confident Jayden Daniels, a little apprehensive, wasn't really wanting to go after those receivers downfield. Versus like the Alabama game, like you mentioned, the Ole Miss game, the Florida game, you saw him taking some of those shots. You saw him more willing to make a little bit of those riskier throws. What do you think was the difference?
Yeah, I think for sure just him, he kept mentioning the whole interview how he just got more comfortable in the system. And if you remember, like this was not only his first year at LSU, this is Brian Kelly's first year at LSU too. So it was a very new year for LSU. Obviously, very successful year compared to what the previous 2 years were. But yeah, I think he was just kind of getting his feet wet in the system. And then, like we mentioned before, like getting into the Alabama game, which was in November, late in the season, that's when he really started to turn it on. So, yeah, I know he talked a lot about wanting to take more shots this upcoming year. I think that's an area that he can definitely grow in because he takes very good care of the football, but he's not really pushing the ball downfield as much compared to other top quarterbacks. So that's an area that he really wants to do more this year and still take care of the football. But, yeah, I think it really was just him getting more comfortable in that new system that he was playing in.
Like Brian Kelly even said, I believe it was before the Tennessee game, he said, it's okay if you throw an interception. Like, not very frequently do you hear your coaches telling your quarterback, like, just throw an interception. It's okay. But I think that the difference in confidence and the difference in the tale of two Jayden Daniels that we saw this past season really ultimately could be the difference in this LSU team. We saw it this past season. You saw confident and comfortable Jayden Daniels. You beat Alabama. You see a little bit more of an apprehensive Jayden Daniels. And, you get to have a really close game against Arkansas. But some of the things in your article, he mentions some very lofty aspirations for this season, which comes with a whole lot of confidence. Heisman Trophy, he mentioned, national championship. He talked about how he talked to Joe Burrow and how cool it was to see a transfer quarterback turned first round draft pick. So he has his mind on some of the biggest things that you can achieve as a quarterback: national title, Heisman Trophy, and NFL. What do you think is Jayden Daniels needs to do this season to get there, to achieve that? How much of that is Jayden Daniels being in the driver's seat of this LSU team?
I think it is what we just mentioned before. It's probably taking more shots downfield. And I think that, he's one of the best runners in college football at the quarterback position. In fact, he was the only quarterback in the country last season with over 1,000 rushing yards. And we mentioned before how he takes care of the football. His 0.6% turnover worthy play rate led all quarterbacks in the country. So he's a guy that incredible runner, takes care of the football better than anyone else in college football, and is continuing to progress as a passer because, back when he was at Arizona State, I'm going to be honest, I was a little lower on Jayden Daniels compared to a lot of other people saying, hey, his accuracy and decision-making, yes, he's an electric runner, but his accuracy and decision-making, he's got to get better. He got a lot better this past season. So I think continuing to progress as a passer, I think that's ultimately what's going to lead him maybe to that Heisman Trophy, maybe leading LSU to the promised land like Joe Burrow did. And he even said, he's like, yeah, man, listen, I understand Heisman Trophy, national championship, all that seems like up there, way out there. But he's like, well, I've seen it before. And we've seen it before with Joe Burrow doing the same exact thing. And nobody expected Joe Burrow to do that either before that last season. So Jayden Daniels, I think, is in a better spot than Joe Burrow was in terms of how good he was going into his last season of college football. So who knows? But Jayden Daniels, I'm super excited to see what he's got in store this year.
I'm always very hesitant to make the Joe Burrow comparison because
Right.
once you throw out that name, then
Right.
all bets are off and every single LSU fan's ears perk up. But I think it's kind of a natural comparison. You have two older quarterbacks transferring; they finally get that opportunity. But I think the difference that a lot of people have seen with Jayden Daniels is we never really saw what Joe Burrow was at Ohio State. He got that opportunity at LSU. We have a full sample size, 3 full seasons of Jayden Daniels at Arizona State. Year 1 was good. Years 2 and 3 were a little bit rocky. So what would you tell people who might say, well, I can't expect anything more from Jayden Daniels in year 5 because we didn't see him break through to that quote unquote elite level in his first 4 years in college football?
Right. And I would even say, just look at the progression this guy has made. He really was thrown into the fire day one, like you mentioned, at Arizona State. Like they kind of brought him in. He was like a top 5 quarterback in the country coming out of high school. And they brought him in. They said, you're go. Like, this is your show now. So a lot of freshmen like Joe Burrow, who sits on the bench, develops. Jayden Daniels was thrown into the fire day one. And then he took some steps back a little bit. Arizona State. I also would point out that Arizona State was going through a very tumultuous time themselves during that time, so I can't really put too much blame on him. So then he really mentioned he wanted to go to LSU because of the competition in the SEC West. He wanted to take the next step in his career. And I think last year he really did take the next step in his career. I think that was by far the best we've ever seen from Jayden Daniels. And who's to say that he doesn't have another jump in store this upcoming season? He mentioned how he's so comfortable in the offense now. Now he's got a full season under his belt. So, if he was uncomfortable in the beginning of last year, now he's got full comfort in the offense. I think the sky is the limit for him, and I think he could be one of the best quarterbacks in college football.
And to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football, first you have to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. And we know that is not easy. But looking at this year's SEC, there was so much talent that left. Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, Hendon Hooker, some of the top quarterbacks in the league. Do you think Jayden Daniels, right now where it stands in May, is the best quarterback in the SEC going into this season?
I think he is. I think I ranked, so I put out my top 10 quarterbacks list in college football returning, and he was number 6 on that list. So he's number 6. He's like, okay, that's good. But the top 5, 4 of the top 5 are Pac-12 quarterbacks. The Pac-12 is loaded at quarterback. And the other one is Jordan Travis, who's LSU fans I'm sure are very familiar with, and they're playing again in week 1 this year as one of my most highly anticipated games in the entire season. Is that LSU Florida State game. But yeah, so the entire top 5 is either Pac-12 or ACC. So Jayden Daniels is the best quarterback in the SEC. You mentioned Bryce Young is gone. Will Levis, too, is gone, too. Anthony Richardson, all those guys, Hendon Hooker, are all gone from that SEC. Yeah, I think Jayden Daniels is the guy now in the SEC, and I think KJ Jefferson is probably right behind him as well. I think I put him number 9 on my list. But yeah, I think Jayden Daniels is, for me at least, pretty clearly the top quarterback in the SEC next year.
And we mentioned Joe Burrow. We know that even Joe Burrow, as great as he was, couldn't do it alone. So coming up next, I want to get into some of the pieces around Jayden Daniels and how much of a factor these 2 returners are for this LSU football team. We'll get into that coming up next. So I've got to tell y'all about my first pair of bird dogs. And I got them really kind of with no expectations. I was like, okay, they're shorts. Like, how great can they be? I didn't expect them to fit as good as they did. I was fully expecting them to be too baggy, too big. You know how Adam Sandler looks in his basketball shorts. That's not it at all. Bird dogs fit so well, and They're so incredibly comfortable. I mean, they're the perfect kind of shorts that I can just lounge around in all day, hang out on the couch, hang out by the pool, but also they look nice enough that if you want to wear them out to lunch or dinner with friends, you can do that. If you got a pair of pants from Bird Dogs, you can wear those to work. You can wear them on the golf course. They're incredibly versatile. They fit so well and they are so comfortable. That's the best part about it because you can wear them anywhere. Well, you want to be able to wear them all day. You can wear these all day long. You'll probably even sleep in them. That's how comfortable they are. And if you're like me, once college football season comes around, you're going to be laying around the couch all day long. So, the college football fan, this is for you. You'll lay on the couch, watch the games all day long, wear your Bird Dogs because they're going to be comfortable. They'll keep you comfortable all day long. You can lounge around, watch the games. But as soon as LSU wins and you're ready to hit the town and celebrate that win, well, you can wear your Bird Dogs because they look that good too. Bird Dogs are super comfortable. They are super versatile. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, then Bird Dogs will throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every single order. They're so comfortable. They look great. I love my pair. Check them out, Bird Dogs. Well, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're chatting with Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus. Check out his article on PFF.com. He has a full breakdown of Jayden Daniels and his aspirations for the season. It's a great read. Max, Jayden Daniels can't do it alone. I want to talk about two returners who really broke out this past season. One on offense, one on defense. Let's focus offensively. Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors came into this past season, and yeah, we knew the name. Yeah, we knew what he could do, but really, entering the season this time last year, we thought it was going to be the Kayshon Boutte show. Then all of a sudden, Malik Neighbors comes out, and he emerges as Jayden Daniels' number one target. I've been approaching this season like, okay, Malik Neighbors is number one. Who is number two? Is it fair to make that assumption that Malik Neighbors is not just going to be number one, but can also build upon what he did this past season?
Oh, I think he absolutely can. And that was a great point by you. I even was going into the last year saying, oh, yeah, Kayshon Boutte, he's the guy. He's going to be a top 10 pick. And obviously, it went really sour for Kayshon Boutte last year. And hopefully he, does well with the Patriots now. But yeah, Malik Neighbors was kind of the guy that I was like, okay, he's like a good complimentary guy. And then he emerged as the guy for that offense. And I ranked every position, the top 10 returners at every position. I put Malik Neighbors as the number 5 receiver in college football and the number 1 receiver in the SEC. So I think LSU has not only the best quarterback in the SEC, also the best wide receiver in the SEC as well. I think Malik Neighbors is a monster after the catch. He actually forced 21 missed tackles after the catch this year, which were 5th among Power 5 receivers, and his receiving yards after contact, 204, were 8th in the Power 5. This is a guy you want to get the ball in his hands, and he can make some special plays. Remember that Purdue play that when LSU was killing Purdue in that game, that bowl game, he had a ridiculous touchdown on that play too. So yeah, I would go back to that play if you haven't seen it already. But yeah, that kind of shows what the kind of special ability with the ball in his hands that Malik Neighbors has.
And Malik Neighbors not only had a touchdown in that game, also had a touchdown pass, just to add on top of everything that he can do. That was a wild game. But looking at this LSU team, I think one of its greatest privileges or maybe advantages going into this season is simply the continuity.
Right.
LSU is returning a quarterback. LSU is returning an offensive coordinator, only one of 2 teams in the SEC to do so. How important is that? And also returning its leading receiver and Malik Neighbors. How important really is that? Are we overstating the importance of continuity, or is that really something that LSU can build upon in year 2?
I think that's a great point that Mike Denbrock is coming back for LSU. And I keep mentioning my list that I've been putting out. I actually ranked the top 10 offensive coordinators as well. And Mike Denbrock was also a top 5 player at that spot. And he actually was the number 1 player in the coach in the SEC, I should say. So
I'm sure he's a great player also.
Yeah, he probably was a great player at some point too. But yeah, so you look at that. I mean, it's insane. So like, not only is the continuity great, even if they all were not good, it still will be good to have the continuity and so they're familiar with stuff. No, these are all elite guys. In my opinion, it's the best quarterback in the SEC, the best wide receiver in the SEC, and the best offensive coordinator in the SEC, all coming back. So that's why I'm very bullish on the LSU offense, at least for next year. And I can't wait to see what they got in store. Especially they got that left tackle, Will Campbell, too, who I think is an absolute superstar, true freshman last year. I think he's a future top 10 pick in the NFL draft when he finally does declare in a couple years. But yeah, he's a stud. And LSU's offense, I'm really high on.
Yeah, Will Campbell is a beast, and I'm getting excited. I know everyone is listening is probably your number one fan now, Max, that you are just loving on this LSU offense because we've been desperate for a fun, explosive offense to watch ever since that 2019 team. You mentioned Will Campbell, and I think that he is one part of this sophomore class that's coming back next season that I'm really excited to see potentially take its next step. Will Campbell being one of them, tight end Mason Taylor, and also, of course, on the defensive side of the ball, Harold Perkins. And Jayden Daniels said, "Hey, we call him an alien." And I think that otherworldly is probably the only word that truly encompasses Harold Perkins' ability. Same question. Malik Neighbor is taking this next step in year 2 under Brian Kelly. What do you think Harold Perkins can accomplish in this new inside linebacker role that he'll be playing in his sophomore season?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see him in that kind of more off-ball role because I compared him to, I don't think he's as big as this guy, or he might not even be nearly as good as this guy yet. We'll see. But Micah Parsons is a lot what I reminded of, where it's like that guy can play linebacker, that guy can play edge defender, and he could excel at either one of them. And honestly, it might be saying, me saying he's not going to be that good is maybe selling him short because he really was that good as a true freshman. I mean, he led all Power 5 linebackers with a 91 pass rushing grade. He had 18 quarterback sacks or hits, which also tied for second, or actually was second among all linebackers in the country in that regard. So he's a guy that, is just a superstar pass rusher. I'm excited to see what he could do more in coverage and as a run defender. But he could be a guy that if he puts on weight, because he's around 220 pounds right now, he could maybe move to that full-time edge defender role like Micah Parsons has in the NFL after playing linebacker at Penn State. So, Harold Perkins is an amazing pass rusher. I mean, Jayden Daniels' eyes lit up when he talked about Harold Perkins, and I'm sure he's very happy that he only has to go up against him in practice and not actually on game days because he was like, dude, that guy's an alien. He said he covers wide receivers deep down the field, which is just ridiculous when you think about a linebacker doing that. So, Harold Perkins is definitely a name to know, not only for the NFL draft 2 years from now, but for college football. And I think Harold Perkins right now is my number 2 linebacker in college football heading into next season.
And hearing you say that we get 2 more years of Harold Perkins is just absolutely music to my ears. But I have this internal conflict with the way that Matt House and Brian Kelly are going to utilize or intend to utilize Harold Perkins this year. Because part of me thinks if Harold Perkins playing in kind of this hybrid role was as good and as explosive as he was this past season, I can't wait to see him in this elevated role with more responsibility, with more of an understanding of the expectations. And then the other side of that is, but he was so good in that hybrid role where he could drop back in coverage. He can come up and play at the line of scrimmage. He could rush the quarterback. If it's not broke, don't fix it. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I for you to say, when you said, I actually didn't know that he was transitioning more to the inside linebacker role. And that kind of is like, okay, I'm excited to see that. But also I'm like, okay, can we still get him on the edge though? Because he was, he was putting out some pass rushing moves that you see like prime Von Miller do back when he was with the Broncos. So that like the ghost move I remember he did against Arkansas. He had like 4 sacks in that Arkansas game. That was kind of, I'm hoping that they keep him as more of like a hybrid edge defender or linebacker. And it would be good to see if he could actually become a full-time off-ball linebacker. But I mean, he's so good at the edge defender spot already. I would hate to take away what I think at least is his biggest strength, and that is his pass rushing. I hope they still let him pin his ears back and go after the quarterback a good amount next year.
Oh, you and me both. I hated to hear that they were going to kind of change his role a little bit, but I'm not going to sell him short. If that's what Matt House and if that's what this entire coaching staff wants him to be, they said over and over again, he's a linebacker. Then I'll just trust until I can't trust anymore. But coming up next, I want to get into an overarching look of this LSU football team, its season, and the SEC as a whole. We'll get into that with Max coming up next. Well, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. LSU is getting a whole lot of national championship buzz. I look at the construction of this team. I look what they were able to accomplish in Brian Kelly's first year. And although success in this sport, in this league, it's not linear, I can only imagine with the amount of returners they have this season, with the amount of continuity they have going into year two, I have to think they can build upon what they did in year one. Do you think the national championship hype is justified?
Yeah, I think it's justified. I think they're definitely going to be a playoff contender next year for sure. And I mean, we mentioned all that continuity they're bringing back. They're also bringing back Mason Smith, the defensive tackle,
Huge.
edge defender hybrid. I mean, he got hurt in the first game basically last year, celebrating a sack, unfortunately. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see. Mason Smith's a freak. I think he could be a first round pick in next year's draft, and I'm excited to see him finally be fully healthy this upcoming year. So that's the guy who I can't wait to see. So, yeah, I think LSU, I mean, the fans are getting excited. I don't know if they're going to win the national championship, but they are definitely a playoff contender next year. And it all starts really in that week one game and against another team that I think will actually make the playoff too in Florida State. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest games of the season. And yeah, it's the first game of the year. So, there's a lot of kinks to get out there, but I think that's going to show us a lot about each of those teams, and really good barometer for next year.
I think that I love it whenever teams don't play cupcakes week one, because I
Right.
say week one, I want to know where I'm at. It's a measuring stick game, and there's no better measuring stick game, I don't think, this entire season than week one against Florida State. Jordan Travis getting a lot of Heisman buzz. Florida State looked at as a top 3, top 5, top 10 team across the country. But I have some questions about Florida State.
Okay.
Look at them this past season. They didn't beat a single ranked team on their schedule. What changed? They're returning a quarterback, returning the same coach. What about from the conclusion of the season last year until now has now propelled them as being a projected playoff team?
Right. Yeah. So I'm very high in them. I actually was lucky enough to talk to Jordan too, and he was a phenomenal interview too. So check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, I would say this roster is a lot like LSU, and which is why I'd probably put more stock into this week one game than a lot of other week one games where, like I mentioned before, teams are really just trying to figure out who they are in the early parts of the season. This is different in LSU and Florida State in that this is kind of the same team that's coming back. And Jordan Travis, Trey Benson, their running back, is one of the best running backs in college football. Actually broke our forced missed tackle stat last year. He broke the record from Javonte Williams. Johnny Wilson, one of the best receivers in college football as well. Then they bring in not only them, they bring Jared Verse, who could have been a top 20 pick in this year's draft at edge defender. He comes back to school. I know he had a great game against LSU last year. Then they bring in a lot of transfers, which is why I'm kind of getting really high on them next year. They bring in Jaheim Bell, the tight end from South Carolina, who I think is an absolute stud. Jeremiah Byers, an offensive tackle from UTEP, who was graded out really well for us. They bring him in too. Fentrell Cypress, a cornerback from Virginia. They bring him in. Braden Fisk, another defensive tackle from Western Michigan. So a ton of really, really good players they bring in while also bringing back all of the talent that they had where they turned around the program, a lot like LSU did as well, and they ended up being a top 15 team in the country. So that is why I'm so high on Florida State next year and why I think they're going to win the ACC and make a college football playoff. So, yeah, that's kind of why I'm really excited to see that week one game, because those two teams are experienced. They're not going to need some time to gel and figure out who they are. They're going to come in week one, and they're going to know exactly who they are, and that's why I'm putting a lot of stock in that week one game.
It makes sense. Two experienced coaches, two experienced quarterbacks. Let's say LSU goes into Orlando week one. LSU loses a close game against Florida State. Are the playoff hopes still alive?
Oh, 1,000% they are. I think,
Okay.
You look at that team and you say, okay, if they lose to Florida State, I mean, the committee is so generous when it comes to early season losses. It's really at the tail end of the season where you can't really screw up that much. That's when you got to kind of prove to the committee. If they look at that and they say, okay, LSU is, say, 11-1, maybe they pull off the Alabama win again. Then you say, okay, they lost to Florida State, but that was 3 months ago. Like, who even remembers that game? That was the first game of the season too. So I think there's a lot of breathing room you have. But on the flip side of that is kind of that's why I think it's great, like you mentioned before, how these teams are playing each other big games week one. Because if you lose, it's like, okay, you can still recover. If you win, though, they're going to look back at that and be like, that was a great win for LSU. They're not going to say, oh, that was 3 months ago. They're going to say, oh, then that was just a great win for LSU. So, yeah, I think this is kind of a really great scenario that both teams are in, is that, okay, if we lose, we can still recover. If we win, though, that is one heck of a win to put on your resume.
For my own well-being and, just overall health during football season, I hope we're not in that situation, but it is good to hear that. But last one for you. I look at the SEC West. Alabama, I don't think they're going to be as dominant as they have been maybe 2019, 2020. Texas A&M's kind of a question mark. Ole Miss doesn't, make me shake in my boots. This is a very winnable SEC West. What do you think could get in LSU's way of winning the SEC West, potentially winning the SEC, of potentially getting a playoff berth?
Yeah, I mean, you got to start with the back-to-back champs in Georgia, they bring back a lot. Brock Bowers is one of the best players in college football. They lose a lot.
He's a freak.
He's ridiculous. It's honestly absurd. He's got one more year of college football, honestly.
It's not fair.
It's really not fair. I'm sure we're going to say the same thing about Harold Perkins next year too. When we're saying how does this guy got to play one more year of college football? But you look at that team, and listen, I doubted Georgia after they won the first national championship because they had a record 15 players taking the NFL draft. I was like, okay, you lose that much, you're going to take a step back. Nope, they didn't. They won 15 games. They won the national championship again. So I'm not going to doubt them again. They're the number one team in the country. They deserve that ranking. So that's kind of the team, the SEC, that LSU's got to get past. And then obviously Alabama too. I mean, Nick Saban, I think this would be the first 3-year stretch Nick Saban has had without a national championship if he doesn't win one this year. So I'm doubting the Crimson Tide like I'm sure you are, and I'm sure LSU fans are too, because they lose Bryce Young, who their team was so reliant on, lose Will Anderson Jr., lose Brian Branch, some other guys on that team too, and they still didn't make the playoff last year. And so I'm questioning that, especially that quarterback room. I'm really curious to see who wins that battle, but doubting Nick Saban is a fool's errand, honestly. So I'm sure he's going to figure it out. So yeah, I think LSU, it's a prime year for LSU to once again win the SEC West, but I'm kind of scared to doubt Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, considering I think they're the two best coaches in college football right now.
That's the X factor. The Nick Saban, the Kirby Smart effect. It's real. It's what makes them, such great coaches. Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus, appreciate your time. Go check out his article on pff.com. Where can the people find some more of your work?
Yeah, of course. Find it at pff.com. Follow my Twitter at @Chad_Max, which was my nickname in high school. And also, I actually have a show now on YouTube and anywhere you get podcasts called Preferred Walk On, where I'm posting the full interviews from all the players I've been able to talk to, along with some other college football videos too. So you can go check that out too if you want to.
Max, appreciate you. We'll have you on the show again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Make sure to go check out Max Chadwick's article on ProFootballFocus.com. It got me ready. It got me riled up for this season. It got me juiced to see what Jayden Daniels can do this season, and I know you will feel the same exact way too. So thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. Every day is on Monday on the podcast. We'll have a full breakdown of LSU Georgia, the final regular season series of the regular season. All of that coming up on Monday's edition of Locked On LSU.